Joining us, this is what we're discussing. What next for the finance bill? Can MPs be trusted to remain faithful to the wishes of Kenyans? Already looking at the Star, Ruto UDA MPs in a tight spot over tax laws. Looking at the Standard, Ruto faces taxes rebellion among Mount Kenya MPs. I did invite a Mount Kenya MP and she was like, I'm staying far away from that topic. And you would understand because you have your constituents on one side who are saying they feel already as things are heavily burdened with taxes, and on the other side you have your party leader who's pushing this particular agenda. So you would imagine you'll be in a very tight spot and need to weigh your words carefully. So what next for the finance bill? Can MPs be trusted to remain faithful to the wishes of Kenyans? With me in studio we have Achieng Akumu, Africa Regional Director, Planned Parenthood Global, Caroline Gaita, Executive Director, Mzalendo. Irene Otieno, I imagine, will be joining us shortly. She's the National Coordinator, National Taxpayers Association, and Diana Gishengo, National Coordinator, the Institute for Social Accountability. Caroline, I will start with you. Wow. Is it true that the period that was provided for submission of memoranda expired? I know there was a 20th deadline that was published in the dailies.
Yes.
So that was for submission of memoranda.
Yes.
And here is Irene. Now we are fully in panels. Then I saw committees started receiving submissions from stakeholders, including Tisa, as Oko Chumi. You did give submissions in person to the committees. Which committee? Finance and Planning? Finance and Planning. Okay. So is that an exercise that ended on Sunday?
Yeah, so it was actually a concurrent exercise because as the public participation process was coming to an end on 20th, the sectoral hearings and the submission of memoranda to the committees and the public hearings was going on, and this ended yesterday. You saw yesterday the unions did present their memoranda to Parliament, and that yesterday concluded the process.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So this is an exercise that ended yesterday?
Yes.
All right. So how do they decide who appears before?
Of course,
committees?
as you've seen from the dailies and even our own online engagement, a lot of Kenyans from different backgrounds, unions, professional associations, media associations, civil society, teachers, individual Kenyans have given their memoranda. I think you saw in the dailies on Sunday talked about 1,000 different organizations, different people submitting petitions, and that just tells you the level of interest that the bill has elicited across different sections of Kenyans. And so these are submitted to the clerk. Institutions such as ourselves and civil society colleagues do engage public participation with different cadre of citizens, and either they submit their views directly or they submit views through formations, coalitions, or even individuals who have opinions on either the entire bill or certain sections of the bill. And so who the House calls is really up to their discretion. So they may not call the 1,000 people, but I would imagine part of the considerations they have is the diversity and making sure that the people they call is diversity of representation. So whether you are talking government, civil society, media, just to make sure that you have a broad spectrum of conversations going on with different stakeholders. Part of it also is to make sure that you don't have just a Nairobi-centric kind of representation of views, because then this is a national bill that affects every Kenyan from every walk of life. And so you want to see that that diversity, in addition to the sectors, also speaks to the face of the nation. Are they young? Are they female? Are they old? Are they from the different geographical locations of the country? And I would imagine that as a committee sets these hearings, they take some of those things into consideration.
Okay. Thank you. Curious, Diana, did you when you appeared before the committee on Thursday? On Thursday. Did you feel heard?
That was the day the PS. That was actually the day the PS appeared around the PS housing. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, yes, we were listened to, and the chair and members of the committee read through the submissions of Okoa Uchumi, analyzed, and when I saw the topic for today, I thought to myself, these members of parliament understand who voted them. They know we are in problems, okay? Because unlike other times when you're pushing back, when you're pushing something with parliamentary committees and you receive a strong pushback, we didn't get that. It was more of, could you clarify, give us proposals of what we must do to ensure that Kenyans do not hurt, but we have some revenue, okay? Because we are really badly off and we must run a government. And I think what we did as a Okoa Uchumi is also remind them, you don't have to plan this big. Because you've planned for a very high budget. If we are in crisis, you go back, move houses. It is time to move from Westlands to cheaper places and things like that. So we were listened to, but we waited. We really waited before we could be heard. But the other thing is, I am hoping they can listen to the people who really matter to their jobs, the voters. And I think that's where we are going next.
All right.
Yes. And we were with Irene.
And you were with Irene. Yes. Irene, you know, you also have constituents. The way the MPs have constituents, you have constituents. The taxpayers. So have you ever witnessed this level of interest in a finance bill prior to this?
Thanks, and indeed, as Diana has mentioned, we appeared before them, but the concern you've raised, or the question you've raised, is critical, and I was very happy that the committee is now grappling with 897 submissions, memos taken to Parliament, more than 1,000, as Gaita has said, in terms of people who are appearing before them. So we have really never seen such level of interest and quality of submissions. We sat in the room, as mentioned by my colleagues, listening in to also others that have gone before us, and you could see that people took time to ensure they are putting a strong case. And you know, this is something we've not seen before, and we've seen a lot of this interest generally around elections within the 5-year cycle when we are bringing in new leaders. So to see that this was not a leaders and a party issue, but an issue that brings in citizens together, and the interest, the critical submissions, I think it's something that we need to applaud as citizens of Kenya, and it just shows that the high cost of living is real. Because most times I think we always had extra, so who cares really? Sometimes you're like, anyway, let them do what they must do. But this time you're seeing both people informal, so the diversity was what was striking, that we've all come together and understood that the enemy is the huge budgets, the wastage that we must rein in. So there isn't who is informal, who's in informal sector. If you see the provisions within the bill, it targets the whole spectrum. When you're in the informal sector, they're coming after you. If you're in the formal sector, so I think it's been a rallying point for all of us, and sometimes it takes trouble for people to understand that they fund the system. So the high cost of living, I think, in as much as we are all really concerned about it, it has given us opportunities that we as citizens, we as civil society players, need to then ensure that we ensure that these gains are things that we build on moving forward. So then I expect that even the next finance bills will be things that civil society themselves prepare stronger, mobilize people, different citizens also make sure their voice is heard. And so I think it has moved. The citizens have done what they can before we then appear, it goes for Parliament to decide, but that should essentially not be the end. However, Parliament decides. I know that's a question we'll discuss, but citizens have now done their bit. So yes, to mention that this was extremely unique for me, having been in this space for some while, and this has always been a prayer. So it's a prayer answered, that citizens were ready to sit for 8 hours straight, and we say, let that business stay. Kwa sababu even if you go for your hustle, they'll come and take 40, I had the teachers talking, around 58% of their pay will be going to taxes. So you would rather stop that business and say, hey, let me make a strong case, and then that would build into the household incomes that you have in the moving years.
All right. Chieng, there's something that Irene said that was interesting. She said, they will come after you. And that mentality around taxes is something the president is working. working, he's very busy trying to, insert that sense of patriotism in Kenyans around taxes. You know, you pay your own taxes, you fund your own way, sort of a narrative. But let me introduce you to Achieng. I'm meeting her for the first time. But I do have her profile here, a legislative attorney and international development practitioner for the last 3 decades. You began your professional career as a legislative assistant to a New York assemblyman, so she understands the legislative process. And within the NGO community, Ms. Akumu served as country director representative for the National Democratic Institute in Namibia, where she focused on developing sustainable programs to strengthen governance, legislative processes, and outreach, women's political participation, civil society outreach, and communication strategies for all activities. So you're in good company. Yes. Between Caroline Gaita, Diana Gishengo, as well as Irene Otieno. But first, let me get your thoughts on this finance bill, and we'll get also into the Oko Chumi statement on the same, because there are some things you supported and there are some things you've taken issue with. What are your thoughts, Achieng?
My brief here is to the invisible population that are often overlooked in participatory budgeting, right? You talk about transformative democracy, I'm talking about the youth. Okay, you know, we have a youth bulge, as you know, we've hit over 60% under the age of 24. Their voices are not heard. Yes, there's that voter apathy. Okay, and I had this conversation last week with young people. You don't vote, you can't hold your members of parliament accountable. How do you express your needs? How do you go before them? Because those are the avenues for that discourse, right, with regards to the bill, etc. So I'm here to make that plea, you know, for young people to better get engaged. They also need counseling, right? You know, taxes are a complicated matter, right? Now, let me get back to their facts. Most of them are unemployed, right? You know, these young people, they're suffering. There's a crisis, right? There's been a spike in teen pregnancy, there's sexual gender-based violence, you know, you name it, early child marriages. So when you talk about household incomes, what incomes are we talking about for that generation? Now, we need them to engage. These are supposed to be the future citizens, right? These bills and the environment ought to enable them to be honorary citizens, tax-paying citizens. But if they don't have that relationship, if they don't understand governance, the two most important policy bills, I think we'll all agree, in any governing nation, the Constitution, that's where your rights are, right? You have to understand your rights in order to exercise them. And then, of course, the budget bill, because that's where the investments are made in you as a person to grow, okay? Understand your, whatever you choose, your walk in life, but you have a role to play, and part of it is to pay the taxes, right? To understand the budget. Budgeting is really key. If you don't have that knowledge, those investments have not been made in young people. And we don't only see it in Kenya, we see it across the continent. I represent 5 countries, Senegal, Burkina, Benin, Uganda, and Kenya. And across these countries, young people have not been invited, okay, to speak for themselves. I mean, that's their desire. Those are their aspirations. The African Youth Charter has given that provision. Has it been domesticated in all these countries where they can actually speak? And I'm not talking about youth MPs. I'm talking about young people as a collective. So I think for them, yes, they're panicked. They don't understand. Of course, they don't understand this whole tax situation. Yes, they're afraid, but then how do we get them to engage constructively with their members of parliament? Because the role of a parliamentarian is that representation aspect, right? You must represent your constituencies, and your constituencies are not just the elites, you know, the corporates. Of course, it's the marginalized and the young people that are part of that. Right. They're not voting. How are you going to cultivate that relationship so they are responsive to important bill processes such as budgeting, which is key. We're talking about the future and stability of this nation. These issues are not addressed. We've seen what young people have been doing in other parts of the world. And so I think what these organizations, and I'm really impressed with all of them, are doing is really key. Civil society must have that voice, and young people in particular.
All right. So, but this finance bill, because you've talked about voter apathy, has served as a shock to the system that you really need to be paying attention. But we need to take a break. But when we come back, Caroline, tell us, will these clerks sit down and go through all these 1,000, over 1,000? I can't even imagine how many pages they are of submissions. And also, walk us through, okay, so we are here, so where next do we go? More on that on the other side of this break, including I'll be looking at the Okwo-Ochumi statement, and a lot of clarification has sought to be provided on certain issues, right? Whether that has changed your minds, ladies, on any of the concerns that you raised, and also the president has firmly said a lot of what is contained in this finance bill is actually to do with the youth. We get into all of that on the other side of this break.
I will make her tell me.
Brace yourself, brother.
I would like us to talk frankly. Did that man make you steal money? Tell me.
What man?
What is your connection with that man, and why did you touch the company's money? Answer me! Alia, are you home? It's Dennis Dobrovolsky. Open the door, please.
It's your husband, Dennis. But what would he want?
Don't talk. You better be as quiet as a mouse. Do you hear me? How dare you? I told you the truth. About Victor, about the blackmail. And you just went ahead and set me up.
I didn't set you up.
Then who did? Was it my sister?
Crystal Rivers Residences, adjacent to the Nairobi Expressway. 3 bedrooms with master en suite. You and your loved ones will experience fine living. Furusha your landlord with our special offer of 50K per month. The future of fine living.
Are you an artist or content creator? Would you like to monetize your content and make passive income? Join us today on Skiza Nation by reaching out to us on our social media platforms or send us an email at skiza@ke.nationmedia.com or call us on 0719 038 575. Skiza Nation, supporting local talent.
I'll give you anything you want, but just don't ruin my image, please. Don't ruin my image. Mamu! Mamu! Boss! Dido! Heshima ameingia. Hili game hatari sana.
To protect our family from germs that cause illness when it's cold, we use Dettol soap.
Dettol soap with germ defense gives you protection. When it's cold, germs are transferred in different ways, and Dettol soap's germ defense protects you from up to 100 illness-causing germs. Be Dettol sure.
No bunga pagi pendene lace the mystery. No ba unga ti browse on flick the mystery. No bunga mni kana next week the mystery.
Only on the trend. 10 p.m. The Trend in association with Spotify.
Babe, have you heard Don Tolling by Uncle Jing Jong?
But have you heard
Have you heard?
Have you heard? Spotify has over 100 million songs.
Cascadia Apartments at Two Rivers Development in Nairobi with a Madaraka offer till 30th June 2023. Price start from 9.2 million. Call us today on 0742 342 722 or text Cascadia to 22365.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. Dana, I've just come across a picture of you and Abraham Muriu, the International Budget Partnership. This must be when you were making your submissions. I've seen Irene somewhere as well. I see Kimani Kuria, MP for Molo, who chairs the Finance. There you are, Irene, who chairs the Finance and Planning Committee. But there's a question I asked Caroline before we took the break, and that is, so where are we in this budgeting process, and what ways do we have to go?
Okay, before we get there, allow me to just take us back to the conversation that we had, and we talked about elections, for example, and I really want to talk because we're talking about, you know, the high public interest, the multi-sectoral representation of public views, the fact that Kenyans recognize that this, regardless of, you know, the class, the region, the bill affects you. And this speaks to a broader issue of representation, because when we are talking about representation, when we are talking about elections and the quality of leadership, we always talk about the fact that the leaders you elect represent you, whether they serve in the executive or whether they serve, and especially when they serve in parliament. And now we are talking about members of parliament being in the eye of the storm, because will they listen to the people who put them into parliament, or will they listen to, you know, the parties that sponsored them, for example, to be in parliament? And herein lies the importance of ensuring that citizens understand that their vote counts, that their voices really count. And so for me, it's beyond the public participation in the finance process, is making sure that citizens continuously hold their leaders to account in terms of how they respond to their views, and also whether they know what positions, you know, their members of parliament have on certain issues. The finance bill is just one of those. There will be many that will be coming, and there are many that have been discussed since the 13th parliament came into office. But could we make sure that this public interest is sustained throughout the process? That's one. Secondly, I think you've raised a pertinent issue around meaningful participation. Will members have time to sift through all these proposals? And will the citizen voices count? Because ultimately that's what will make public participation count. Do these voices, this diversity that we've given, will the members take this into consideration? And from past experience, it's not been, I wouldn't say that the success rate has been very high, because we have seen that even when the public views are divergent from the views of the political class always seems to have its way, because in a lot of ways parliament you know, will be whipped into taking the party lines. The vote will be done in such a manner that even if you have a divergent position, you may not have that willingness, because, you know, you don't want to you don't want to go to offend your party position. Having said that, though, I think there's, I do know that there's a process that the bill will need to go through. The committee needs to sit and consider all these considerations, and then make sure that as they review them, then these are taken into consideration. But it's not just, in my view, the concerns that they have to factor in, the balances, like she said, you know, of revenue vis-a-vis sources of this revenue and what needs to be done will all be at play. And the question then to ask is, what will take the day? Is it the citizen voices, or is it the government priority? And are there other sort of conversations that we need to then be having beyond the finance bill to make sure that we are looking beyond what's in the taxation, but what has brought us here in the first instance? So issues of corruption, wastage, and public debt, a conversation that perhaps will come up as we discuss further.
All right. And I want to get into the statement, because you talked about, when you're talking about how they vote, And it brought to mind the when was it when they were voting on the petroleum, increasing VAT on petroleum products, and I can't remember whether it was Soipan who was chairing the sitting at the time, and she asked, is it, you know, ayes or nays, and people were nays, and then she went, the ayes have it. So in my recollection, I might be mistaken, but one of the proposals is this: Azimio to push for open ballot in Finance Bill 2023 voting. And you also had a proposal as well, but I'm just trying to trace that Okochumi statement, which I will. But Irene, the other day, the president was at KRA filing his returns. And he said previously, and this is something he's repeated time and again, even remember when he was revising the targets for revenue collection, and he says previously the relationship, and I go back to what you said, they will come after you. Previously the relationship with the taxman has been adversarial. You know, and he said he's trying to foster an environment, you know, where all Kenyans pay tax. And he did acknowledge that for a lot of Kenyans, their concerns are that, one, not everybody is paying tax fairly, and two, that the taxes that are collected are spent prudently, which is the question that Caroline Gaita has raised. You welcome this push towards that, a friendlier engagement, friendlier relationship. Is it that even possible? Because they tell us two things in this world are certain: death and taxes.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I'll just make reference to the Bible that says we ought to pay. So being a Christian, I think it's something that is agreed. And if you speak to many Kenyans, they'll say they understand that government needs to resource, and there are quite ambitious development goals we have at country level, at the African level, internationally. There are many commitments we have put in regards to providing social economic rights. So when we talk about taxation, we are not talking about it in a vacuum, but we are looking at this as a pathway to provide essential public health, which then would address the issues we are seeing around youth, our girls, our women. Are they accessing reproductive health rights? When you look at children and equality, we know that the right to education does even ensure that a country is set in a good place to have a workforce that can, you know, be able to develop. So all of these things that is agreed, we must resource. I think the problem then becomes what we have mentioned amongst ourselves here. It's an accountability issue. So if you want to foster a good working relationship between the taxman and the taxpayers, it's the prudence in utilization of the funds. So I feel that KRA is, you know, is cleaning up and mopping because of the shortcomings from the executive in terms of usage. So if you were to use, however much KRA rebrands and call itself whatever they would want to call themselves, but we still feel that there is wastage, which is not within their control as the Revenue Authority, because their mandate is very clear. Collect, we channel this to the executive to be able to provide essential services, and to the legislature to be able to oversight. So that means that we need to look, as the president needs to understand that what he ought to have discussed so much on that day is not the corruption from the Revenue Authority staff members only, but the corruption from his own government, corruption even from our own elected leaders who we are taking back this finance bill to discuss. Because we can't shy away from the fact that we are expecting them to do magic around discussing the finance bill, but we also are alive to their own audit reports of so many things, a lot of illegalities. When we've seen the pushback on even the NGC CDF, people are really angry as elected leaders because we are trying to say what the Constitution says, that Parliament ought to do oversight and not implementation, because then you become conflicted. So if the elected members of Parliament are waiting for allocations on CDF, do you think they are going to side with you on the finance bill? So I think there are ground rules that if we are trying to answer the question on how Parliament will decide, we need to ensure that our structures give them even that room, but they are so conflicted at times that it's difficult to do that. So anyway, just to answer what you mentioned, I think the president is looking at the wrong side of things. It's not about rebranding, with all due respect. The thing is around accountability. We are comfortable. I have paid taxes since I was formally employed. I know I've been paying it through value-added tax. I know it is a way also of redistribution. There are people who don't have what some of us are privileged to have. So if you look at tax also as a justice issue, a tax justice issue, we must pay our fair share. I'm in agreement that we must bring more people into the tax bracket. But we shouldn't bring more people into the tax bracket. We're not addressing corruption, because it then means you're expanding, but there are too many holes. So it will never lead us to more taxes. So let us expand, because it's a tax justice. I, being formally employed, totally feel bad when I look sometimes at people in the informal sector who are not paying their fair share of tax and relying on essential public services that we are paying for. So this conversation, even as we speak around finance bill, I think as civil society players, as advocates, we also need to speak to citizens and say, we are not against the finance bill in the sense that it is trying to expand and bring others, because remember, at regional and everywhere, the way people do business, the way people hold property keeps evolving. So our laws then need to keep evolving to be able to bring them in. But my hope was, as we expand, then we can be able to reduce tax rates. So as we expand, are we also exploring reducing tax rates? So, but now when you look at the proposals from some of the finance bills saying anyone earning more than 500,000, we then pay as you earn as 35,000. So we have put a threshold of 500,000 as someone who's wealthy. That's not. I think in Kenya we have totally underpaid people. If you look at even our minimum wages, save for top-level public and state officers, most people in Kenya are underpaid, and that's why you see most of our people going to other countries. So we have underpaid them so much that we feel a normal pay is a rich person. That is not. And we have done reports as National Taxpayers Association, very keen on taxing wealth, and we put thresholds, and the threshold was never 500,000. We're looking at 1 million and above, because then you need to also be able to ensure that people feel rewarded for work. I heard from the submissions before Parliament that work is not a punishment. But right now it's like when you're working and being productive, government would want to punish you by paying you more tax. But we work not to be able to just give government money. We work to be able to provide safety nets to our children where government itself has failed. And I think the reason people are averse to paying tax is because we are essentially double paid. I will provide, I will pay my taxes, NHIF. I will never get medicine. I will be told, go to the pharmacy, an extra outside pharmacy, private pharmacy to get my medicine, go to a different lab to get my medicine. So then you see, I am paying it, but providing my own services. I do not know the last time that government itself provided in terms of garbage collection next to my place. I procure it at my own cost. And allow me to just also look at, even when you look at rental tax, where we are saying that property owners should pay because they are wealthy. But remember, most again of these property owners, I am a strong advocate of tax justice, but we need to be unbiased advocates. You look at someone who has a unit, say in Kasarani, the person doesn't have water. They have to bring water with they have to buy it for their tenants. Yeah. So those are costs that if you want these people to pay tax, why would someone pay tax as a landlord when the drainage right outside where his tenants are, there is no water? So I think when you're looking at taxation, you must demonstrate as government that there is a bit of value. So if it's rental, let you show that you're providing water, you're providing ABC. So in essence, what we are telling our government, taxation is agreed. We are not arguing about the importance of financing for development, and that he has made it clear. He needs money to run the country. But with the very same words and strong words, he must tell us that there is accountability. Let us see audit reports changing. And I think this is a critical time also for we as civil society, for citizens to say, we are going to pay tax, but under these conditions. Can we have conditions and say, audit, you must commit that audit reports, 50% of the audit reports will need to change in the next 1 year before you bring another finance bill. We need then to totally disengage all funds that elected leaders are having, whether it is ward fund, whether it is NGC, CDF, whether it is women fund. These are all funds that if put together can provide essential services and free legislators to look at the core. When we are talking about 1,000 submissions, they will not get time to look at those 1,000 submissions if they are also looking at the projects they need to give at their own county. So we are giving them time to look at our because we do pay them a lot of money if you look at the things we are offering. So we also expect that they concentrate within this period. 1,000 submissions also is not so much, because if you all come together and are looking at them and also look at the critical discussion we are having, I think it's not expecting too much for them to look, because even the quality that has gone in from the people who've submitted then requires that there's also quality engagement with those provisions. Otherwise, then we would kill the momentum of what people will, because it will be the question of, we participated so strongly in the 2023 finance bill and other related laws. What came out of it? So if we do not manage this situation well, we might go back to the time where no one really would want to engage on the finance bill.
All right. Irene, you clearly feel very strongly on these matters. But Diana, the last time we were here, I made a confession. And the question of corruption and bribery. But I was listening to the head of the public service the other day, and he was talking about how when you do business in Kenya, you have to factor in this other tax, and that other tax has to do with corruption, bribery. You have to factor it in. He was saying whether you operate, whether you're in the transport sector and you're dealing with police, or you're going to government agencies, you have to factor in that time.
Yes.
The president, even at KRA, said he's not sure how many KRA employees would remain if they were to investigate those who have assisted tax evasion. And something else the public service head said was that, first KRA's instance, for example, you're met with a demand letter of amounts that you probably have never transacted. And then now you have to negotiate your way to a clean bill of health, as it were. So are you encouraged now? Because there seems to be a greater sense of civic responsibility where Kenyans are concerned. They are more woke, to borrow a colloquial term. They're woke, right?
Yeah.
Now to issues of corruption, they're paying attention. And especially with the finance bill, they're saying you cannot increase tax without tackling the sieve, tackling corruption. So are you encouraged by these statements coming out of government? Because I know governance and accountability, very big issue for you.
Am I encouraged? I am not sure. I am not very sure. But one thing to say is, with colleagues here, lately the president and other officials from the executive speak, and you're sure they are listening. But are they hearing? Are they hearing what we are saying? So, for instance, what the president has done consistently at KRA, saying we must seal the leakages. That's commendable, okay? And if it is to be implemented, we may make some gains there. However, please note, when it comes to revenue, we get our revenue from taxes and from debt, where our money is stolen easily, sweetly, smoothly, is debt, not taxes. We have greater leakages and planned plunder when it comes to debt compared to taxes. I am sure this is something the president knows and the executive. I am hoping we can now hear of the audit into our debt stock, most of which, as Okoa Uchumi, we estimate, if we do a proper audit of our debt, most of it will be odious debt. It was never acquired for Kenyans, it wasn't procedural, and it was never used for Kenya's benefit. If that's the case, 60%, 65% of 65 shillings of every 100 shillings we collect should not be going to repaying debt. There's a very high chance we may save 35 and improve our healthcare, improve education, we improve water and sanitation services in this country. However, we have decided to focus on one area, even as we speak about corruption: audit of our debt and prosecution of people who have plundered, borrowed money. Only think about it, and I like to remain with the people because I'm with the people. It is unlikely I will cross. You've seen, imagine somebody borrows money to start a business just across the road, one of the banks. That money is stolen. You air that story, okay, of a young woman who has borrowed 300,000, signed. So by next month, she is required to start making the repayment. But all of it is stolen before she even goes to Gikomba or to Kamukunji to buy the capital, the goods she needed. We ran that story. Imagine the anger and empathy that Kenyans will have. That is what has happened to our 8 trillion debt. Most of it has been borrowed, okay? Whoever was the CS Treasury, willingly or unknowingly, was slapped, and our money was taken in another direction. And we are here, everybody saying, we have debts to pay. You need to understand the president and a country to run. Surely, all our attention or significant attention must go into accountability for our debt. And if you look at the increase since Kibaki exited, we had like 2 trillion. We are now at 8 trillion. By the time we finish this particular regime, and if we continue with this planning for a very, very expansive budget without proper austerity measures, it will only go up. It didn't start now. Yesterday night, Senator Okiya Omtata indicated that our first debt that was stolen was in the 60s. Anglo-leasing was around stealing of debt. This year, our debt repayment is double the amount. Why? Because we must pay our first Eurobond. An additional 200 billion. That is a one-off payment. Somebody negotiated and said, don't worry, Kenya will wait for 10 years, then after that, we'll pay you a lump sum payment. What about KRA? What plans were made with KRA to ensure that we will have a lump sum bulk payment? Yet this is money that has been reported by the CBK governor. They are not sure where it is or whether it came to our consolidated fund. The Auditor General, the former Ouko, has raised it several times. Why would we bury our heads for such a significant amount that was supposed to bring change and development? And debt is intergenerational because government or sovereign debt is not like the debt I borrow, okay? I even take insurance. If I am out of employment for 3 months, they come and assess me. I will go to the small claims court and tell them, I can only pay this, okay? And we negotiate. Sovereign debt, because a state is a higher entity, and they also understand that, look, we are giving you money, you organize yourself, you grow your economy and develop. You're given repay. It's like a mortgage with a pause. You start repaying after 10 years. So if you plunder, if the Eurobond was plundered when the dollar was at 60%, 60 shillings to the dollar is now at 140. What have you done to this country and to our children? So I think, like Irene, I'm excited that Kenyans are now seeing our choices have consequences. Tunaumia pamoja, but I hope we can get to a point where we consistently demand accountability together. The challenge is to ensure this does not die with the finance bill. Personally, I don't believe we've closed the public participation because we are Kenyans. They have borrowed sovereign debt. We are the sovereigns, okay? They have not even passed that bill. And the beauty of this time is all these memoranda, we know the numbers. Even you guys in the media, because you are now very affected and alive, you've helped us do the analysis. So we are very, very united in pain. We are united in pain as Kenyans. Carol will be here telling us every minute, which memorandum has been considered, how have they voted, every single step. The heat that is being given to Mount Kenya MPs needs to be given to every single MP. They cannot sit there in their glass houses. MPs sanctioned the debt we are in. They have voted for previous finance bills, budget policy statement, year in, year out, that has given Treasury the muscle to go and borrow and then allow our debt to be stolen. Now it is time for us to demand accountability. If they do not have the muscle to demand, we do not have the muscle to pay anymore.
Okay.
We have nothing else to lose. We must make demands that there must be consistent accountability. And because there was the issue of the youth, the revolution is on TikTok. When we go for Maandamano next week, all the songs have been created for us by the youth. So everybody knows the pain.
All right. The Maandamano is on TikTok. And interesting that, and I'll come to you, Achieng, now. And speaking of civic responsibility, I'm looking at the front page of the Daily Nation now, and I can see here that a report, and this I think was carried out by Aga Khan University, for Gen Z, dress code is king. They care less about work, money, or current affairs, says new report. We talked about the voter apathy that has been demonstrated by this demographic. And there's something that you hear a lot of people in Kenya say, if so-and-so has read it, I have read it. Like, you know, that culture of if my political leader endorses it, then it is fine. And people will not go and read for themselves. And like Okia Omtata, who told us, you mentioned Okia Omtata, who said he has read the entire thing. So how do we engender that culture change?
Thank you.
In this demographic.
Thank you for that. And my sister here has really set up that. In my mind, I was just continuously thinking about constituency outreach. What's next for the finance bill, right? It has to be unpacked for young people, okay? Biteable, digestible side, and for them to understand their priorities, you know, in terms of like their future, right? It's very important that they understand that if they don't understand and begin to digest and appreciate these issues, their future is going to be a state of hopelessness, unable to deal with the debt and the significant issues that the colleagues have raised here. Accountability is really important. So we go back to civic education. We used to have civic education in school, right? To understand your role as a citizen, as an honorable citizen. That social contract, that compact is really important. Young people don't understand it. That's why they delegate, you know, to if I've read it, then, you know, if he's read it, I've read it. No, you need to understand your rights and how you exercise them, not delegating them to somebody else. And that's with every bill. And I think it's really very important that the young people are listened to understand what their priorities are. Our research has found that, no, the number one priority for young people is employment. They have understood that they need to work, and then of course the counseling will come with that payment of taxes. It has not been the norm, it's not been the culture, right, across our continents, unfortunately. Other parts of the world, you don't pay your taxes, you go to jail, okay? But that's not necessarily the norm from what I've heard from the colleagues and in Kenya. But these are things that must be taught, okay? This civic education is really key, it's important, and it's on both sides. I think with the members of parliament, they need to reach out to their constituents, listen, understand the priorities, and then come back to the parliament and ensure that these things are definitely packaged in the bill. That's their role. The lobbying, yes, that can be done. These colleagues have done an excellent job. They continue to lobby. But that oversight and that representation role is something that citizens ought to understand so that we can hold them accountable. Accountability is so key. And also knowing the mechanisms. You know, young people just know the only mechanism that, let me, and correct me if I'm wrong, is protest. Okay, there are constructive ways to engage, and that's where organizations like mine come in to engage young people, train them so they understand, okay, when you get a seat at the policy table, and we've done this in other parts of Africa, young people are there advocating their own needs with regards to the budget bills in Burkina Faso and Senegal. They're at the table, but you must understand the language and constructively engage. So this finance bill needs to be unpacked for young people. These are experts here, been doing it for years. But I think, you know, in Namibia, we did a cartoon, okay, understanding the budget bill, you know, for young people so that they begin to understand and digest the importance of what their future can look like once they understand these very important processes, starting with voting, but then how do you continue to be a constructive citizen? You talked about water bill, we talk about education, and then let's talk about reproductive justice, okay? You know, the lack of investment in health in this country and other countries is atrocious. How do you expect to grow your economy, right? Let's make the intersectional argument, okay? That's why I'm here. The intersectionality of health. Health should not just be relegated as a health issue. It's a development issue. It crosses all sectors. Because if you don't have healthy women, girls, and young people, then you're not going to grow your economy. And I think we should be alarmed by the numbers that are seeking employment or willing to go overseas and suffer, right? Because it's not going to be, it's not like a cakewalk. It's not like you're going to the World Bank or to the UN. These jobs that I believe most of them are well, let me not categorize them, I don't know. But I know what I've seen working overseas with young people that have the sense of hopelessness in their country and the lack of economic benefits have forced them to go overseas. They're still not going to get those benefits from overseas. Our young people are our greatest resource on this continent. We're a resource-rich continent. Kenya is a middle-income, rich country, and the investment ought to be made in young people, but young people ought to have a say. They ought to understand and be able to participate and not just say, I didn't vote, I don't care, and then left with that situation. So it's really commendable, I mean, your organizations and what you're doing, but I think we are here, and I'm so happy to have met the colleagues here so that we can partner and train our young people how to constructively engage members of parliament. After all, they're there to represent you and understand what that social contract under the new constitution and all the international commitments that have been made. Like you've said, a lot of money has been brought into this country and other countries to empower young people, to engender budgets, okay? That has now been mainstreamed. Let's talk about youth, you know, and their priorities, and that includes them being healthy and having access to information and services. Now, there's language in the budget bill, but I don't believe young people are, I know, because I was in a slum community last week and supporting a group that now I've understood, okay, we've taken care of our health, sexual reproductive health rights, now what? Okay, so the employment and the enterprise aspect. So we've partnered with a group, with NILAB, to now help them to understand how to operate in this space, and that includes paying taxes, the benefits of taxes, understanding why you need to pay, and the whole development of a nation, right? So that we can also, as you said very correctly, sustain this engagement, okay? Because we're just investing. It's INGO will be leaving soon, but how does that continue? Through local communities and through the young people that are the future leaders. How are we grooming them so that they participate and do not put in further debt, like you said, that will never end, as well as the corrupt practices, and avoid conflict. Let's also talk about the instability that's caused, and we don't need that. So this governance, this tax is a governance issue. The thread is woven across all sectors, and I really want to say that the youth are key in terms of trying to address the issues and make sure that they start that pathway towards, you know, sustainable development, and that includes understanding what do we call it? Fiscal responsibility. Yes, I mean, you're never too young. You're given pocket money as a child, right? Yeah. Right, for you as a reward. Okay, how do you use that responsibly? How do you account for it, etc.? And so I think that's really important. That's social accountability.
I don't know how many Kenyan children receive pocket money, but
well, okay, we used to.
On the youth, I do engage youth on Fridays.
Yes.
And they're trying to fight for that space. But many times it's not, the environment is not enabling. You know, if you don't have a godfather or deep pockets, you know, fighting into that space is not an easy thing.
Correct.
But also, we have seen how Kenyan youth have championed the climate change agenda, for instance. So there's tremendous potential in that demographic. It's just, for a lot of us, we have become disillusioned. I hope they're not yet quite jaded. We take a break, but when we come back, Caroline will advise us on how we can track this bill on the other side of this break.
When Jose Luis Mendilibar joined Sevilla in March, it was simply to see out the season and ensure the club was not relegated. That goal has been achieved, as has more, namely a place in the final of the Europa League, underlining the veteran manager's influence. Which means 3 months will surely turn into something more at Sevilla for Jose Luis Mendilibar.
Crystal Rivers Residences, adjacent to the Nairobi Expressway. 3 bedrooms with master en suite. You and your loved ones will experience fine living. Furusha your landlord with our special offer of 50K per month. The future of fine living.
We came to ball. Let's get straight to it. Ready for whatever. We gon' ride. Line them up. Let's go toe to toe. Tell them pick a side. Put in work. We don't play no games. Watch him running high. Savage mode. We gon' keep it G. Yeah, you know the vibe. When it's meal time, who gon' tell my dogs we can't eat? Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm a threat.
Get the Ballin' Twister box for only $7.50. NBA, KFC, balling all day.
No bunga ni kabok ni misteri. No bunga pagipende ni lace the misteri. No bunga ti browse on flick ni misteri. No bunga ni kana next week ni misteri.
Only on the trend at 10 p.m. The Trend in association Techno Common 20 series.
Cascadia Apartments at 2 Rivers Development in Nairobi with a Madaraka offer till 30th June 2023. Price start from 9.2 million. Call us today on 0742 342 722 or text Cascadia to 22365.
All right, welcome back to AM Live. Before Carol advises us on how we can track this finance bill, let's quickly take a look at Oko Chumi and some of the things you supported, the ones you disagreed with. You know, they say don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So here are some of the issues, some of the things you took issue with, where VAT is concerned. Of course, there's the one on an increase from 8% to 16% for petroleum products. I'm scrolling through here. I see even excise duty amendments, for example, with regard to mobile money services increasing from 12 to 15% of the excisable value. And your explanation here is members oppose this proposed amendment because it may lead to reduced transactions, thus reducing excise duty collection. I'm scrolling. I'm not going to touch on everything, just a few things. The introduction of an excise duty on all sugar imported and locally produced, excluding imported, the introduction of an excise duty on all sugar imported and locally produced, excluding imported or locally produced sugar purchased by the pharmaceutical industry at 5 Kenya shillings per kg is opposed, as it would hurt locally manufactured sugar and local farmers. The coalition recommends that there be no excise duty on all sugar imported and locally produced, excluding imported or locally produced sugar. And then also the question of increasing the 35, remember this you've talked about, Irene, and you said the idea that because you earn 500,000 shillings or so that you're wealthy. You're saying no, in fact Kenyans are underpaid. As we were told, we are undertaxed, so Kenyans are also underpaid. Then let me see, there's the one on the 3%, the turnover tax. You've also taken issue with that, saying that it should be retained at the threshold of 1 million to 50 million, as opposed to the coming back to, is it 500,000? Yes. Minimum? To 1%. All right. And back to 1%. Okay. That's the current situation, yeah? So retained. Yes. Retained. All right. So here are your proposals, right? You came to the table with solutions because, as you said, we keep being told dire financial, economic straits. First, reduce the wage bill is your proposal. Number 2, reduce tax expenditures. And then the third, push for the full devolution. And somebody talked about health here, and it's Ching. Push for the full devolution of functions from the national government to the county governments. The fourth measure is to empower and adequately finance institutions like the EACC and the judiciary. Can talk about issues to do with tax without coupling it with matters corruption. Fifth, empower the Office of the Public Debt Management by making it an independent office. Sixth, increase Parliament's oversight of budget implementation to reduce wasteful expenditure. And is housing here, the levy? I haven't seen it in the statement. I could have passed it. But the President has made several explanations with regard to this and what it is all about, and I'll come to you and ask if he has managed to get you on side on this issue, especially where youth and employment are concerned. But this is what you propose, and I had referenced the Star article on open voting. So you say we will collate all memoranda submitted to Parliament by the people and disseminate widely the will of the people. 2, mobilize all Kenyans to inform their Member of Parliament on their stand on the Finance Bill 2023. Have a people assembly of all 290 constituencies during the debate and voting on the Finance Bill, and prepare and publish how each MP voted. Is that possible? Yes. Number 4, if the will of the people is subverted, we will commence the process of exercising our powers as the sovereign, as Dana keeps reminding us, and commence public actions targeting the executive and parliament across the entire country. So how can, because to be honest, I agree with Achieng. Even for me, I remember when Parliament published the proposals, and now we're inviting the public to submit memoranda. And I would see section this is amended to this, but I would not quite connect the dots unless maybe I had the 2 bills in front of me. Then I'm like, okay, section what says what? And then I go back to the other one. So even for me, I struggle to make sense of it. we have the benefit of business editor Julian Zamboko. We go to his Twitter, we read, we are like, oh, okay, this is what it means. So even at that stage, I struggled to keep up. How do we keep up with it now, this finance bill?
Okay, and really it's a technical conversation, and the lovely thing about the finance bill is that every year is when we see the financial institutions and the finance experts and the tax experts really come out and take the center stage in terms of governance. But it's an ongoing conversation. Remember, by the time we're getting to the finance bill and the budget process that begins in a fortnight, there's a whole process that started way back, you know, sectoral hearings, public participation processes were ongoing. And I want to say that this process is not a by civil society process, for example. In most cases, it's with, it's for, it's by. In other words, that we are bringing together all these partners. If it's young people, the most comprehensive or simplistic sort of explanations on the implication of the proposed taxes that I have seen has been through young people, TikToks, you know. The biggest calls for MPs to take responsibilities, I was amused, I saw one targeting Mount Kenya MPs from where I come from, and the guy is saying, look, these guys, this is how they will vote, despite the fact that we expect them to vote this other way. In other words, it's to say that people have agency and they have the information. Having said that, how do we make sure that they have that agency? Part of it is really unpacking the bill, as Achieng has said. And I would want to commend the different actors, media, civil society, churches, professional bodies that have really gone out of their way to say, this is what this clause proposes, this is the implication of this proposal, this is what impact it will have, and if there are solutions, these are the solutions that we propose. And this sort of engagement has not just happened with citizens, or it has also happened with duty bearers. I think last week on Monday, we were engaging a team of members of parliament to just also take them through the bill, because even then, it is not, it's not to be assumed that the members of parliament who represent us come from the finance sector. They also need an understanding. So there has been this broad unpacking. Now, two key dates are coming up. There's 15th June when the CS Treasury tables the budget, but of course, the critical one of 30th June, when the bill has to be passed. Otherwise, it will have implications on government spending for financial year beginning 1st July. So as citizens, the question then is, within that duration, what is it that we can do? Of course, now it's to lobby and push and call upon our members of parliament to make sure that our voices count. That memoranda that was submitted, those 1,000, 2,000, and remember, this is just the physical stuff that's been submitted to parliament. A lot of views have been collected online. Citizens have been on media, have been on social media, have been in studios like these ones, talking about the bills. These voices need to count. And so for us, between now is so part of the campaigns we are running, even as an institution and also within the larger Okwa Uchumi family, is asking, what do you expect your MP to do? What happens if he doesn't do it? So you need to tell your MP how you need to vote. This is when your voice as Wanjiko counts. Secondly, you need to then keep an eye, and you ask whether it's possible to know how members are voting. Unless a secret ballot is adopted, it's actually possible. And we've done it before, previously, for example, when we were doing the revenue. Remember the impasse at the Senate around the revenue allocation, and you can actually who votes yes, who says no, and the numbers and the names, and we tally those and we give you the voting patterns of each MP. So you need to remind your members that you'll be watching. And if this is your interest, because we are not saying that everybody's interest is a no. If your interest is a yes, then make sure your member of parliament votes yes. But perhaps also you've asked the question, why is this bill, like compared to the last several, why is it eliciting so much public response? Remember, we've just come from an election. We are talking about better, bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Yet, the person who feels most affected is actually that same group because of most of the proposals. But you're also saying that a lot of part of campaign promises made were around the issues of improving the livelihood of Kenyans. But the question then we are not seeing is this likely to improve the space of Kenyans? And remember, the last administration focused so much on development, sometimes at the expense of the economic empowerment of the people. And so we went to elections with cost of living being a very critical issue, lack of money, in the space. And Kenyans are saying, close to a year on, we are not feeling the change. And if you ask me, it's the question of not only were we suffering then, and we voted change, and now instead of change, this is likely to worsen the situation. That's two. The second thing I would like to quickly touch on is we've talked about a lot about broadening the tax base. But I think the other bigger concern is around the fact that for most people, it feels like we are seeking to deepen the tax base. So you're really going after the same people over and over again, yet without corresponding ease of their lives. So you're taxing more, but they're having to rely on private solutions for what should be public. So let me put it by saying then that for citizens, this is your time. This is the one moment that you really have to make sure that you know who your MP is, you know where they stand, whether it's in terms of the political party or coalition. You know what they promised you, you know what they told you was the biggest problem with the other side, and what the solutions they proposed. And now you need to see how they will vote and how this speaks to your interest. And then ask yourself, if they don't listen to me, then what next? Part of the what next might involve the picketing that we've talked about, might involve litigation, to make sure that the finance bill is not enacted, might involve further consultations, before the bill is enacted with the different stakeholders. But the process is not closed, and might still involve sectoral sort of litigation. If you're the insurance sector, you say, look, we are going to court over this 16% VAT. If you're petroleum, you're saying 16% on petroleum, no. And so those options remain. But it's to say that if we had taken for granted what public participation processes mean, maybe this is a reawakening to realize that the Constitution has given us room to inform our governance space, but it shouldn't be that we do it only when it feels like it has such a direct impact. Every law that Parliament passes, every bill that's passed by Parliament, every executive proposal has an implication on a facet of our lives, and we do need to pay an interest. And Mzalendo Trust and other institutions within the civil society, we remain committed to making sure that as citizens you're aware and you make informed decisions. And for this informed decision is to look at facts, look at proposals, and don't be blinded, by the other political noises that normally will come about, parties, tribe, ethnic affiliations. Remember, at the end of the day, I am Wanjiko. When I'm paying my bills, I am not paying my bills as Wanjiko, and Achieng is paying her bills as Achieng. We are shopping in the same market, and therefore we need to look at this as Kenyans, all affected, regardless of class, party, or political affiliation.
All right. Irene, do you have grassroots? And actually, you might want to follow at Mzalendo Watch to track and find out, so how did my MP vote? Did they vote in line with?
And let me say, at Mzalendo Watch is our Twitter handle, but we do have all platforms all across. We are on TikTok. We are talking to young people on TikTok. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. And we have a Voice with Mashinani, a Bonga na Mzalendo platform, where this week we've been collecting citizen voices from across the counties, and we've been asking them, how do you want your members of parliament to vote? And you can see the trajectory of the no's, and we even want to see, like these party affiliations, we want to see are citizens being swayed, for example, by where they come from and how they think they should vote depending on who is supporting the bill or not. And so we'll be doing that analysis. In addition, when it comes to the parliamentary proceedings, we provide you with a minute by minute, second by second analysis of the proceedings of parliament. And when it comes time for the vote, we will actually give you a live vote. And before these conversations, we will have told you, in addition to what Parliament itself does, we will have told you when the vote is coming up and make sure that you can follow all the proceedings. So if you want to even know what your member of Parliament said in relation to the bill, whether in support or against, then you can be able to do that. And finally, our Hansard allows you to even be able to search and see what your members of Parliament said. So really, as a tool to facilitate legislative accountability, I think we've created the platform. But beyond that, there's also a lot of policy, legislative analysis that's being done by our colleagues in the sector that really can inform, at this stage now, can really inform members of Parliament to make decisions that speak to the wishes of Kenyans.
All right. You've actually answered my next question, which was, I was going to ask what civil society is doing to help unpack bite-sized pieces, as Acheng put it, the finance bill. Because for a lot of us, it's when you see it on the paper, you're like, Allah, helicopters, no VAT. And then, you know, the whole insurance thing. I saw a clip on WhatsApp circulating of a guy from PKF, because a lot of these audit firms actually do that sort of breakdown and try and simplify type thing. So it's good to hear that you're actually on the ground helping people understand and also finding out what their views are on this finance bill. But Irene, prior to the statement on the finance bill, there was this one that was shared with me on, and this is titled, "The Decision to Abstain from Participating in Perfunctory Article 4 Consultations." Because around this question of finance bill is how much of it is on account of external pressure that is coming from organizations such as the IMF. And so I'm just going to quickly look at some of what you wrote. Following the invitation, as Wakwachumi, following the invitation by the IMF Nairobi office to participate in consultations with your office on the ongoing fiscal consolidation program in Kenya, our civil society under the Wakwachumi campaign umbrella declined the invitation to engage with IMF. The decision to abstain from the meeting is premised on the fact that despite previous meetings, we as civil society strongly feel that our collective contributions to the process has deliberately been ignored by the IMF, and the consultations are being used to legitimize a process that continues to put majority of Kenyans at a greater risk of hunger and poverty in spite of our dissatisfaction and protests. And over the past few years, the Ukua Uchumi campaign has consistently engaged with the IMF, shared several submissions, both oral and written, regarding the fiscal consolidation program and Kenya's economic development, governance and challenges. During these sessions, the campaign members felt the lack of the IMF's interest in a meaningful engagement, premised by the lack of concrete responses or considerations of the submissions made, as well as the glaring lack of consideration of the effects of austerity measures on growing inequality, hunger and poverty in the country, harming the most vulnerable of our population. And so this is some of what you've raised during your previous consultations: rising and unsustainable public debt, monetary policy, issues of good governance, burden of taxation, which is what we're discussing today. It's a very strongly worded statement. What pushed you to this point? And also it raises the question of, you're saying you have clamored, you know, where this is concerned with the IMF. How sure are we now that even this clamor, for which is the question we're addressing today on the finance bill, will result in anything tangible?
Thanks. And I think we were very deliberate in the wording of that statement. And I must say thank you to our secretariat headed by Tisa and Diana here. Of course, if it was me, the tone would have been a bit, but I like that she brings that energy into the space. so that is a breath of fresh air, really. But what pushed us is we have taken all avenues to have consultations. So you would note that it's been around 2 years of actively engaging with IMF and the likes of some of our other partners. So that kind of, it's been like window dressing. You know, a lot of time we have been used as civil society to validate processes that say communities were engaged, civil society players were engaged. But at the end of the day, sitting here as both Mzalendo and other partners here, we do not assume that we are representing ourselves. We have constituents behind us. We have people and stakeholders that in terms of even individual organizational visions and missions, there are things that we stand for. So it would be completely wrong for us to continue being so detached from the reality of the people we are working with and for. So we do not advocate on our own issues. A lot of things you see the Okoa Uchumi members speaking to are things that we've spoken with the local community entities, social justice groups, women groups, youth group, women groups. So by the time we are having consultations with IMF and the likes, we bring these views and positions. So we felt after analyzing, of course, it was after a lot of deliberations really for us to come with such a statement, is to take stock and ask ourselves what has been the result of constantly engaging. And you know, this was coming against the same time that we were having the discussions around finance bill. So you cannot oppose the provisions in the finance bill, but on this other side, supporting, you must understand what is the root cause of the finance bill. The finance bill is simply symptoms of something else. So the root cause is some of the things that are being pushed by international players. And if you read what the advisors from the government side said, they mentioned that we should go craft our own budget that does not have conditionalities from IMF, that knows that there is no debt. So that was what was being thrown in our face. So I think also as coalition members, we had to look at the body language, at the signs we are getting from government also, and to see that if we don't do this, half of the things we are advocating for in the finance bill will not be addressed. So moving forward, I think this would also be what should be expected from the coalition, because again, it is the feeling of citizens. You have seen a part of the reasoning we've given behind that is, of course, the debt accountability that we are not seeing a lot of action on. Neither are our partners, both at the international level, pushing and asking for these things. So within this period, they still add the debt that we've been given as a country. So they are not looking at human rights concerns, because if then you continue accumulating debt, it means you can't even provide social economic rights. So our question is, whose brief are they holding? Is it citizens? For us, it's very clear whose brief we are holding and who we are advocating for, but we feel they as players are not alive first to concerns of the citizens, not alive also to the context, because as we've said, finance bill had very many interests and concerns. You mentioned the petroleum. We also know there are issues of climate change. So generally, we would be saying climate change would affect women. So this would be a good thing progressively, but the timing of it is what is not right, because the high cost of living. So we feel that some of our partners are not alive also to the economic situation that households, we bring it down to the households, have to contend with. So when you look at Kenya, it becomes too broad. But when you look at the impact of some of these things on whether a parent would be able to put food on the table, when you look at VAT, so then it removes the tax from being very abstract and know that this is a life and death, it's a justice issue, it's an education, it's a food rights issue. So we feel that the context has not really been acknowledged by our partners, and if we hold it this way, then it's an attempt to let them see that we cannot continue in this regard. But I'll also let the lead, Ms. Diana, speak a bit to the language, why we had to tone and you see it also got your interest. So I'm sure that also happened on the other side. And really, I'm hoping that it would not be that it has closed that door, but to show them that we are just tired of the ordinary way of doing business, and we must be true to the people that we represent as players.
We are not window dressing. Yes. But Diana, on account of time, I'll invite you on another day. We'll get into this on another day. But for now, this is what I want you to have as the last word. Since you released the statement on the finance bill, the PS, you've talked about the PS housing, Charles Hinga has come out trying to explain certain aspects of things. The president himself has come out to try and explain certain aspects of things. And he said, this is it. Because you said, you know, this is perhaps not the time. Households are already struggling. But he said the urgency has been created by the unemployed youth that we have. He talked about, I think, 800,000 or so. It's more, of course, but I think he's talked about 800,000 a year, something similar to that. I'll need to verify, check myself where that is concerned. But he said we have a huge population of young people without jobs, and so that is why we are focused on the housing, affordable housing. It will create jobs primarily. He talked about value addition where the agricultural chain is concerned, and he said that is why they're also focused on these industrial parks. And even in the digital space, as the likes of Eric Omondi shouted, say this thing, these taxes are going to finish us, he said there will now be Wi-Fi, so you can transact in that space as well. Has that convinced you that this is something that needs to happen and needs to happen now, Diana?
Olive, I don't understand why government runs things the way they do. This is the Star newspaper. It has an advert called Boma Yangu Affordable Housing Program. I assume this is around the housing levy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages of an advert on the housing fund. When the PS presented, said this is something they have thought about, relied on World Bank data since 2017. A government relying on World Bank data when we have the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics that does our census and demographic surveys. They can be sanctioned at any time to ensure that they have a very, very tailored and accurate report. We do not even have data that could be cited. I am quoting what I had when he appeared before Parliament for us to go with. So a proper feasibility study has not been done. The government is comfortable giving us 6 pages of an advert in the newspaper, but not comfortable enough to articulate a policy and a legal framework for a project this huge. Instead, what we are treated to is public lectures, occasionally trying to show us we need housing. All of you who are privileged must come now and help those who do not have houses. In the process, the government contradicts itself. Whenever you have a significant project of a national scale, the one thing that you must start off with is trust. Unfortunately, how the housing levy has been introduced to us, all we see is distrust. What do you want with our money? 6%. How will that create employment when employers are saying, look, if you force us to pay this amount and what we are paying for NSSF, the increased tariffs, and HIF premiums that will now, for particularly people earning above 100,000, will be higher than most of the premium insurance companies. Have we been convinced? No. Is this the way to teach us about housing? No. Does this resolve the people who are in Nyando, whose houses are flooding? No. Does this resolve the crisis of housing for pastoralists who are facing harsh climatic conditions, the high-rise apartments? No, it doesn't. Go back to the drawing board. Employment is not just mujengo ya nyumba. And the truth is, the finance bill does not make construction of houses cheaper. The tax on building materials, cement and so on has gone up. So why are you speaking from both sides of your mouth? Why? There's nothing that has caused us to move from distrust to trust. Please shelve it.
Okay.
Shelve it. And when Kenyans speak about things like this, like Huduma Namba, it will remain Huduma Namba for a very long time. This housing levy, by next week, we'll have a name for it, the true name for it.
Okay, so I want to thank you, ladies, for coming on AM Live this morning. What Diana was referencing is runs through from page 14 of the Star that I have seen, facts and figures on housing in Kenya, and several numbers there. So I will read through it and see
and Olive, when
what the argument is.
Broke, Is this the priority, or it is money to counties?
Diana, no. Even us, we need advertising. So,
and you have seen tax on advertising.
Yes, Carol?
Allow me to say one thing, especially in terms of these conversations. It's important for us to remember that Kenyans have never tired of taking the hard way. When Kibaki came into office and Kenyans needed to walk to bring discipline into the matatu sector, Kenyans walked. And therefore, Kenyans are willing to go through discomfort if it means improvements in life. So the larger question here is about public trust. It's about accountability. It's about trust that whatever we give you will be used effectively. So we need to stop confusing issues and speak to Kenyans and say, what's the value for money? How will we utilize your resources effectively across all the proposals?
Okay.
And remember that when it matters, Kenyans have shown up. But also when it hasn't worked for them, they have also shown up. And this is the moment that then Kenyans need to show up and say what really counts. Accountability, public trust, public participation that matters, and ensuring that a government is responsive to the people that put them into office.
All right, ladies, Aching, I know.
Sorry,
2 seconds.
Add inclusivity. Okay, inclusivity is really key. Break down these barriers that have been discussed, like in places where we cannot necessarily access the information, authenticity in how you communicate, and continued engagement. So that is really key to democratic transformation.
All right, ladies, let me say thank you. Winnie Lubembe is literally breathing down my neck. She's coming on next with Your World. But in studio, we've had Aching Akumu, Africa Regional Director, Planned Parenthood Global, Caroline Gaita, Executive Director, Mzalendo Trust, Irene Otieno, National Coordinator, National Taxpayers Association, and Diana Gishego, who says, today I want peace, she wants violence. I'm kidding. National Coordinator, the Institute for Social Accountability. It's been a privilege having you on AM Live this morning, and thank you for watching.